Hi, and welcome to the Peak Endurance Podcast. My name is Isabel Ross, and I'm the coach at Peak Endurance Coaching. Episode 74 is an interview with John Kelly. Most people will know John from when he made trail running history on April 3rd, 2017 by becoming the 15th person to ever complete the Barkley Marathons. The Barkley Marathons is held in Frozen Head State Park, Tennessee, and is known to be the toughest endurance challenge ever, with over 160 kilometres of tough terrain, sheer drops, thick forest, and navigation. He grew up exploring the dense mountains and forests around his family's rural home in Morgan County, Tennessee, constantly trying to keep up with his older brother and cousins. John ran during high school, where he describes himself as a good but not great runner. During college and grad school, he took a full decade off from the sport. After grad school, he rediscovered his love of the mountains when he hiked the John Muir Trail with his wife, Jessi. John ended up running the 2013 Marine Corps Marathon, calling it an absolute disaster. He decided he could do better, so he got himself a Boston qualifier. As it was some time before he could actually race the Boston Marathon, he decided to give ultras a go, and then also try triathlons because he loved cycling too. It was this background in a variety of disciplines that led to John creating the Grand Round, which involves running the three most difficult rounds in the UK, the Bob Graham, Paddy Buckley and Charlie Ramsay, and cycling between them. Can I ask you a favour? Would you be able to go on over to Apple Podcasts to rate, review and subscribe to this podcast? Doing this really helps it to grow, and it's greatly appreciated. How is your running going? If you are plagued by niggles and injuries, head to the specialists at Health and High Performance. They can help you by utilising the latest in technology and experience and get you back to running your best and achieving your potential. So go on over to healthhp.com.au/run or find them on Instagram, Health High Performance. I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to getting back to racing. To be ready for when this happens, you need to be working on getting stronger, fitter and faster now. You can do this with a structured and well-planned training program with Peak Endurance Coaching. Email me, Isabel, at peakendurancecoaching.com.au, and let's get your training moving in the right direction. Enjoy the interview with John. Hi, John, and welcome to the Peak Endurance Podcast.
Hey there, thanks for having me.
Firstly, congratulations on the birth of your daughter.
Thanks very much. She's a week old today.
Wow. So it was a pretty exciting birth, I believe, fairly quick. She arrived quite quickly into this world.
Yeah, a very different experience from our others. The first was much longer, I guess, as first ones usually are, and then the second and third were twins. So it was just kind of 27 minutes from the first contraction to she was out and in our arms.
That's awesome. All righty. Well, can you tell the listeners a bit about yourself, your running background, and how you actually got into running?
Sure. So I kind of grew up chasing my brother and my older cousins around, and ran track and cross country and whatnot in high school, but then it really took about 10 years, a full decade off while I was in college and grad school. As I was finishing up grad school, I kind of said to myself, well, I've always wanted to see how I could do in a marathon. I guess it's kind of now or never. I should sign up for one and give it a go. And so that was in 2013. And things have just kind of gradually progressed and snowballed from there.
So 2013, so that's progressed quite quickly, really.
Yeah, and I kind of, my initial goal was to see if I could qualify for the Boston Marathon. And I had always done a lot of hiking and backpacking, and so I enjoyed the mountains and the trails, and really kind of when I found out about ultra running and trail running and these crazy things that people were going out and doing, it was kind of my two worlds converging there.
Yeah, no, definitely. And did you qualify for Boston?
I did, on my third attempt. So
Well done.
I had some nice steady improvement over those first races.
And what was your fastest marathon?
Last year I ran New York in 2:35.
Nice.
So I'm still I'd still like at some point, if I can find a nice chunk of time, to actually devote a few months to a proper marathon training block and see what I can do. I'd like to at least get below 2:30, but we'll see if I'm able to do that. There's so many things to do and so little time to do them in.
I know, it feels like that, doesn't it? So on August 21, you completed the Grand Round, which is a challenge you created. Am I correct in understanding that?
Yeah, so it combines the UK's Big Three classic fell running rounds, which, individually they're very well known and challenges that many people have done over the years. One person before, Mike Hartley, had linked them all, driving between. And before I even knew about that effort, I kind of put this idea into my head of combining my love of cycling with mountain running and put this together.
So what exactly, for some of my listeners here in Australia who may not know, what is a rind?
So it is unlike kind of trail running, there's no specific marked route. It's essentially peak bagging. So it's a route that you start and finish in the same place, and you have to hit a set list of summits along the way. And so some of these have been established for quite a while now, and the general goal on these is to do them individually in under 24 hours.
So it was the Bob Graham, Paddy Buckley and Charlie Ramsay rinds, is that correct?
Yes.
And you cycle between them. What's your cycling background then?
I about the same time that I got into ultra running, I also decided I'd give triathlon a try. I lived in near Washington, D.C. at the time, and summers were quite hot and humid and miserable for running, but I had lovely areas to bike and where I lived. So I did triathlon for a few years, went to Tacona twice,
Oh,
and
wow, that's
kind of
awesome.
right at the end, when I knew I was going to switch full time to ultra running, I decided to take my pro card for one race, and so I was a professional triathlete for all of one race, and then switched over to ultra running.
Oh, we're glad you did. So this was your second attempt at this particular grand round that you had created with the cycling in between. The first time was in May 2019. So what was the difference between these two attempts that you were able to complete at this time?
So I learned a lot from that first failure, and that's kind of how a lot of my successes and a lot of my
Sorry, you just dropped out a bit then. What was that?
Oh, sorry. So that's how a good number of my successes and my progressions have happened is by aiming big
Yeah.
and failing once or twice. And so from that failed attempt in 2019, I learned a great deal about the terrain, about the weather, about the roads, about a reasonable schedule and strategy. And so I took those lessons learned and built a better schedule, a better strategy, a better bike route,
Yeah.
and came back to it better prepared and more confident and alongside that.
So that was in May that you attempted that, and this time was August. So is the weather significantly different between May and August?
So it's, May traditionally would be kind of one of the best times of year to do it. I did it in late May last year, but I got unlucky and got
Yeah.
just absolutely smashed by storms the entire time I was out there. Both rounds, gale force winds and torrential rain, and the kind of thing that I was a bit, to be honest, naive about coming from the U.S. and having not spent a lot of time in the British mountains. So those conditions make a huge difference on that terrain. And
Yeah.
so this year, I figured it couldn't be any worse. And the first round, it wasn't all that bad. It was a bit wet, but most of the time it was okay. And then it kind of degraded from there until on the last round, I got hit by Storm Ellen, an
Oh,
actual
yes.
named windstorm came out through while I was in Scotland on the Charlie Ramsay round. So it's one of those things where it it just the chances of getting 5 straight days of great weather in the UK are,
Slim.
yeah, it's if you're waiting for that, then you might be waiting for quite a while.
Yeah, I can understand that. So, what was the terrain like?
It's one of the things that I do enjoy here is with the fell running, that it's the peaks are the objectives, and get
Yeah.
in between them you have a lot of freedom and creativity, and what the best way of going about that is. So I've become much more familiar with bogs since I've been here. Again, not something we have in the U.S. Where you step in these what appears to be perfectly normal grass, and then you sink up to your waist and can't move your legs in this muck. So that's one thing to deal with. But then beyond that, it varies quite a bit between kind of open fields versus extremely rocky terrain. It's a few scrambles here and there. I wouldn't call most of it all that technical, but there's definitely some rocky sections in there.
So to help with the route finding, I know sometimes people when they're doing the rinds, they have like locals, who know it well, helping them. Did you have anyone guiding you or pacing you at any point?
Yeah, and so that's a big part of kind of the tradition and the
Mm.
culture of the rounds is the support out there on them. And so for this, definitely I was supported and had people that were helping carry gear and helping with the navigation. There were a couple of short sections where I was separated from my pacers and was on my own. Leg 4 of the Bob Graham round in particular, I was kind of out there on my own. And so, uh, navigation isn't isn't horribly tough, especially with a GPS track. But
Yeah.
when you're doing these things and you're kind of cutting it close on the times, then being able to take the best line and having local knowledge to know exactly where those best lines are, it's extremely valuable.
Yeah, I bet, especially when you're trying to do it fast. So you were out there for quite a long time. How long was that in total?
130 hours and 43 minutes from start to finish.
That's a long time. How did you deal with sleep deprivation?
That's one thing that in my schedule this year, I built in a lot more time for sleep. Last year, I had a more aggressive schedule. I didn't get as much sleep, and I ended up calling it really because I didn't feel safe
Mm.
biking up narrow Scottish mountain highways in the state that I was in. It's one thing to kind of be stumbling around the hills, sleep deprived. It's another thing to be biking on a highway with trucks whizzing by you at high speed. So I had it scheduled to, before and after each round, get a good chunk of sleep, 2 to 3 hours. And then on that second bike section as well, there was a camper van that met me at a few support points, and so I was able to get some naps along the way, and in particular, we found out that there was a road closure just before I reached it, and so the detour would have probably added about 2 hours onto the bike leg. And so I decided, well, I'm just going to stop and sleep here and wait for the road to open back up before I continue on.
That sounds like a smart idea. So you spoke about, it's dangerous on the road on the bike. You didn't have like a car following you, like with hazards on or something to protect you. You were out there on your own on the road?
So I did most of the time have one or two other riders with me, but yeah, I was on my own, and it's something that going into it, I was kind of concerned, especially about biking at night. And last year I had placed a high priority on working my schedule to where I didn't spend much time on the bike at night. But this year I found that honestly that was the best time to be out there. The traffic was light. I had as much illumination on me as a car has, pretty much. I was decked out in lights, and to that extent, I was much more visible than I would be during the daytime.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And it certainly makes sense with the less traffic. Did you have to get any kind of permission to do it, like with the cycling on the road and all that, as a group?
No. So that's another thing, that last year I didn't have any familiarity with the roads, and I tried to stick mainly to the back roads, and it really slowed me down. So this time I took a better route, and the one scare we did have was heading into Liverpool. You go under the Mersey River. There's a tunnel there, and it opens to cyclists at 8 p.m. I think it's from like 8 p.m. to 4 or 5 a.m. that cyclists can go through it.
Okay.
And so I stopped on the western side of the tunnel to take a nap until 8 p.m. And we got there right at 8 p.m. and they told us, well, the tunnel's closing for maintenance at 8 p.m.
No.
to everything, to all traffic. And so we were nearly kind of foiled there, but then a supervisor waved us through, and we were able to slip through there before they shut it off.
Oh, that was very lucky. So I assume you had some sort of crew to help you?
Yeah, definitely. And there's, I spent an immense amount of time planning and sorting out the logistics of this beforehand, but even still, there's no way that I could have managed it without the people that were out there running with me, and also without the road support, especially when it came to the final round. And the conditions deteriorated, and my schedule slipped, and I was in a pretty bad spot. And Martin Stone was my road support for most of the time, actually, from that tunnel at Liverpool through to the end. And he's a very experienced fell runner who did a lot of things like this himself decades ago. And so without him, someone who has the knowledge to know what's needed and to have the network to actually put together what's needed and get it there. So for that final leg of Ramsay, I was met with basically an all-star cast of Scottish hill runners. Awesome. To get me through that safely, through that last leg. And so, I mean, that was huge. And I don't know that there's many other people that could have done that.
And that's so great that people came together for you and really wanted to help you and see you succeed. I bet that was certainly, something that you really appreciated.
Yeah, it's something that I've been quite amazed with since I've come here, and
Mm,
I mean almost to the point of being embarrassed of how much people have come out and helped, and but it's just again kind of goes back to the tradition and culture here
yeah.
of people really supporting each other on these challenges, and wanting to see each other succeed and see each other complete the rounds and anything else that they decide they want to take on.
Yeah. Um, and so the round consisted in total of 185 miles, which is 297 kilometres of running, 25,440 metres of elevation, and that was over 113 summits. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I did get a bit of bonus distance on the round, so that would bump that up above the 300K mark.
Ah, okay. Cool, cool, cool. Sorry, I
Um,
must have got that wrong.
well, yeah, I think you said what the distance should be,
Ah,
but like I
okay.
said, yeah, a
Yeah,
few little wrong
that's right.
turns and
Yeah,
whatnot.
yeah. Bonus miles, and then about 400 miles or 644 kilometers of cycling. How do you train for that sort of amount of effort?
You don't. To be honest, it's years of
Yeah,
cumulative buildup. The miles and the races and the experience that's built over that time, and so it's definitely not something that there's no couch to grand round program. Um, but I was coming off another hard effort a month
that's right.
earlier, and
Mm.
so I kind of took that 1 month window to recover from the impact on my legs while building back up my bike fitness. And that's one
Oh,
thing
that's a
that
good
I've
idea.
I've been pretty amazed with is having spent those years in triathlon and competed at a high level there, that I'm able to get my bike fitness back to a pretty good level in a short period of time. I can take a week or two and get it back to a spot that took me years to get to when I
Mm.
first started off in triathlon. I'm by no means back to like my Kona peak cycling fitness, but it just again shows how important that cumulative build and experience is.
Yeah, no, definitely. So the challenge you had before was completing an FKT on the Pennine Way, which itself is about 430 kilometres. And I was going to ask you what you did for recovery, but obviously the cycling. Do you find also that cycling does benefit your running?
I think it does. It's kind of everyone's an N of one in these
Yeah.
sort of things, and it's tough to say definitively. I haven't since I gave up triathlon. I haven't cycled a ton. That I've had the 2 grand round attempts, and that's been the majority of it. But I will say that kind of as I was getting into ultra running and triathlon at the same time, um, on those first few marathons I did, and even the first few ultras that I did, the the first thing that always gave out on me was my quads.
Mm.
And after spending a lot of time on the bike, that's never been an issue for me again. At the ends of these sorts of things, the Grand Round or Pennine Way or Barkley or whatever, I'm almost always mentally shot rather than physically shot. My legs can keep climbing, they can keep doing
Wow.
whatever I ask them to. It's just, whether I can consciously actually ask them to do something is the bigger question.
I was going to ask you that because from seeing what you've been doing, you must be incredibly mentally strong. How do you push yourself when the going gets so tough and the weather's bad or just some of those tough races and FKTs you've done? How do you keep pushing yourself?
Uh, so there's kind of three main things I rely on. The first is breaking it down into manageable chunks. So when I'm out there, people always ask me, was there any point at which you thought you wouldn't finish or you wouldn't do it? And to be honest, I'm never thinking about that when I'm out there. I'm thinking about, can I make it to the next point? And I spend a lot of time preparing my schedule and my pacing and everything beforehand. So I know if I can make it to the next point and I'm on schedule, I don't have to think about whether I'm going to finish. I just have to keep making it from point to point on schedule. And if I do that, then I'm good. So I don't let myself get overwhelmed with the thought of how far I have to go. The other bit, though, is choosing things that are personally meaningful to me, and that I enjoy. And so that gives me a huge amount of motivation when I'm out there and thinking about that goal and what's been invested in it to get to that goal, and how, relatively speaking, on Ramsay, when I had like 24 hours to go, that might seem like forever, but relative to all the time and effort and everything else that was put into it up to that point, that's nothing. Like, what's another 24 hours? So, and then the final thing is really built with experience, of being able to remember all the times that I've been in similar situations or worse situations, and been able to pull through and continue on.
Yep. No, that's good points. So was there, from this Grand Rhine, was there a particular high point and low point you could share with us?
The low point was definitely when Storm Ellen hit on the Charlie Ramsay round. So I was, to that point, I was about a third of the way through the round, and I was actually ahead of my 23-hour schedule. I was moving quite well, and then the storm hit, and just quite quickly, things were wet and windy and extremely cold, and my body just, it was kind of like it could fight the fatigue and the sleep deprivation at the same time, but then a third front opened up on the weather and the staying warm, and it couldn't handle it. The way that my body was depleted, it just could not regulate its own temperature. And so I was I had to face the fact at that point that over 100 hours into this thing, I was not going to be able to finish on my goal schedule, which my goal was to do all 3 rounds in under 24 hours. And so I had to make a choice then of, you can either quit, you can try to keep moving, but likely burn out, or have some major issue occur, or you can kind of, be sure that you stay warm and keep moving forward and finish the thing, but just slower than you wanted. And so I went with that. It was, a tough call to make, but I had to make it. And then I'd say the high point was when I was on top of Ben Nevis, and I had actually finished. It was my 113th peak. All I had left was the descent back to the start point, which ended up being quite long and torturous. But at that moment on the summit, I wasn't thinking about that. That was kind of when I knew that I had done it, that I would get to the finish one way or another.
Yeah, that would have been an awesome feeling. What did you do for nutrition during that round, the whole Grand Rhine?
So that, something of this length, you're looking at not only your normal fuel, but you've got full-on meal replacement at that point. So I did as best I could with my normal fueling out on the rounds. My hammer gels and bars and Perpetuum as kind of my foundation, and throwing in whatever snack foods and other things I've found that work well for me, and trying to get a steady stream of calories down. But you're never going to be able to replace everything that you're burning in those situations. And so before and after each round, I made a point to try to get a full meal in. Fish and chips, burgers, pizzas, pretty much anything that I could get down, I did. And then the bike as well. I tried to use that a bit for calorie replenishment, because without the jostling motion of running, you can eat a lot more on the bike. And so I can get down 500 calories an hour there and try to restore a bit of the deficit that I built up running.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. How's your recovery been since doing it?
I'm pretty well there. I'm at the point now where I'd say I'm recovered, but I now have the job of building my fitness back up to a good spot. I had some pretty bad tendonitis that developed really during the second round and became a major problem on the final round, and so that took a few weeks to fully recover from, and so focused again on time on the bike during that stretch. But generally for these things, the hardest is the mental recovery and the sleep deprivation and all sorts of fun kind of issues with systemic fatigue that your body goes through in the first week, of headaches and nausea and night sweats and all sorts of things that it's not sore muscles really that I have to worry about for these recoveries.
So when you say with mental recovery, how do you enable that to happen?
Try to rest, try to focus on the sleep, and allow myself time to kind of process things and try to ease back into a normal life. But that's not always straightforward, because I've got a job and a family, and they're still there, and they were still there while I was out running, and so I've got to catch up on things. But mainly I'd say the sleep and the trying not to worry too much about getting back out and running or what you're eating or whatever. Just kind of let yourself some time to relax and not worry about those things. And when you do feel ready and the time is right, then you can slowly get back out there and get back to the running and get back to a bit more focus.
Yeah. Now, many of my listeners will know you obviously from Barkley. How does doing Barkley compare to doing the Grand Round?
Well, it's kind of. I was actually thinking about this morning. At this point, I look at Barkley and I say just 60 hours, because I've done now in the past year Grand Round 130 hours, Pennine Way 64 hours, and then Spine and Tour de Géant were each roughly 90 hours. But Barkley has a whole lot of other difficulties than just the time that you're out there, and so it's a very tight cutoff. Barkley is, and so there's a lot more pressure, a lot more kind of situations where you might find yourself in a bit of a panic. Particularly because it's unmarked and deep forest where everything looks the same. You can't see very far, and so it's easy to get off track. It's easy to get lost. There's no one there to help you with that. You're on your own most of the time, and so there's a lot more variables, a lot more things that can go wrong. Whereas this is more about just kind of continuing on and focusing, especially with all the support that I had. I'm able to focus on just keep moving, keep taking care of myself, and keep moving. And so I would say that it's not quite as stressful as Barkley is, and overall, with no time limit, I would say not as difficult as Barkley is, but definitely if you pretty much anything, if you put a hard enough time cutoff on it, it's going to reach that same level of difficulty.
Yeah, no, of course. So what does it take to be a winner of Barkley?
It, it's easy to say to focus on one thing and to get strong on one thing, but really I'd say to be sure that you're not weak on anything. That's the deal with Barkley, that again, there's so many variables, so many places where it can find your weakness and something can go wrong, and that's it. You're done.
Yeah.
If you make a mistake on navigation, you're done. If you're not fast enough, no chance. If you can't manage your sleep and your food, tough luck.
Yeah.
And then you've also got to deal with the unpredictable obstacles, like the start time of the race and the weather, which can swing from freezing to 30 Celsius in 12 hours. And so I'd say that the biggest thing of Barkley is to not be comfortable with doing things where you might fail and where there's going to be a lot of unplanned obstacles along the way. But to really, as far as your skills go, make sure that they are very well rounded.
Yeah. So, and in regards to the sleep, how do you prepare to be awake for multiple days with little no sleep, but still having to concentrate on things like navigation? Do you do any kind of sleep deprivation training? Is there any point?
Not by choice, but with 4 kids and a job at a startup, it happens.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a way to really train for sleep deprivation. You can learn how your body responds to it and how to better manage that. For me, everyone's a bit different on that. It's same as nutrition. There's so many stories about people having crazy hallucinations and everything, and I've never had a hallucination. I get to the point where it's kind of like exercise-induced narcolepsy. I could just fall asleep as I'm going along the trail, and so I've learned how to manage that a bit. What sleep strategy works best for me in terms of how often and how long I sleep, which again I think that's a bit different for everyone. And another very important skill is being able to fall asleep at the drop of a hat. If you're trying to optimize things and you need to get some sleep and you're looking to get a 30-minute nap, but it takes you 20 minutes to fall asleep, it's pretty inefficient. And so
Very
you
much
might
so.
need to, you might need to rethink your sleep strategy if that's your case, and maybe go for longer, less frequent sleeps. But
So on the
so
times you've won Barkley, have you slept?
so the year I finished, I slept about 30 minutes after loop 2.
Yeah.
And then I had 2 dirt naps on my final loop. I slept for about 15 minutes twice,
Yeah.
where I put myself in a spot where I knew I would get rather uncomfortable and miserable after a little while, and then that would wake me up and get me moving again. But the other thing I've found with these events, and with Barkley in particular, is having something like the navigation to focus on and to think about and to really engage your mind can actually be a big help on the sleep. On that last loop on Barkley, the places where I felt the most exhausted and the most like I could just pass out on the side of the trail were the few times that I was on an actual trail and I didn't have to think about where I was going.
Oh, that's interesting. I would have thought Yeah, the concentrating would make it the other way, but yeah, that's fair enough. Yep.
Well, it definitely, it makes the navigation harder, but the navigation makes the sleep deprivation easier. So it's a bit of
It's a
a
symbiotic
trade-off there.
relationship. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what is your next challenge or event for you?
I've got a few things that I'm thinking about over the next year. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things and not enough time.
Yeah.
And it's especially difficult with the COVID situation constantly changing and not knowing what will get canceled and what I'll
Yeah,
be
that's
able
right.
to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got a few challenges here in the UK that I'm thinking of that wouldn't be dependent on COVID cancellations. Maybe doing the rounds in winter, maybe going back out on the Pennine Way to try to get the record back,
Yep.
and then there are the double rounds, the Wainwrights, and then some races I do want to get back to as well, like Tour de Gion. I definitely feel like I have unfinished business there, and as I mentioned earlier, I tend to not necessarily do my best on the first attempt at something, and so I hope I can take my lessons learned and get a better result there.
What did you feel you left out on the course there? How did you feel you didn't really achieve what you wanted?
At Tour de Gion, I really had issues with sleep in the latter half of the race. So I was moving well and moved up, I believe as high as fourth, and then just I let my sleep debt get too big. I didn't take care of it early,
Yeah.
and once I was in that big of a hole, I found myself just kind of a number of dirt naps and slowly started slipping back, and once I started slipping back to where I felt the podium was no longer possible, it was one of those moments where mentally you just kind of give up and you say, well, is it worth it now to put myself through this? And so every single aid station I came to, I basically ended up sleeping, and I kept napping my way all the way back down to I think 16th is where I ended up.
Yep. So that would be a good one to do again. And do you think will you be aiming to get to Barkley next year, if you can?
Yeah. So I mean, I've been kind of coy about that one in the past, but I think that at this point, it's I'm not fooling anyone saying I'm not going to. So it is something I plan on doing, and that'll of course depend on COVID and depend on my own ability to travel there. With it no longer being right down the road from me, I'll have to travel there from the UK and have 4 kids, so it makes it slightly more difficult than the family visit to my parents, who are right across the street from the Barkley course.
But it's a
It
great
used to always
excuse
be.
for a family visit.
It is, but the issue now is my oldest is old enough to be in school, and so it needs to align with a school break if he's going to go for that long of a period.
Travel's a great education.
That's true.
I used to be a teacher, so I can say that with some experience. Anyway, well, hopefully you will get there, and COVID won't stop it again, because we'd all love to see how you can go. But congratulations on the grand round, and thank you so much for chatting with me.
Yeah, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
All right, thanks for that. See ya.